a good bit younger, and we still lived at our old house. Our aunt and uncle lived just a little bit down the road in the same neighborhood as us. On one particular summer weekend, we had been invited over to their house for a brunch party. So of course, 8-year-old me, along with my twin brother, surprisingly also 8 at the time, as well as my older brother, who was 13, were all up early getting ready for the party. By that point, the clouds had already parted and the sun was breaking through, warming the cool the night had left in its wake. Given the temperate climate and our proximity to the target, we all decided we'd walk over to our aunt and uncle's house when the time came. Of course, the time came 30 minutes late, as our parents promised they'd be out in a few minutes. Every few minutes. Well, once our delayed flight took off, we got there pretty quickly. Because brunch is such an ambiguous thing, our aunt and uncle had just left out all of the food for people to take whenever they ended up arriving. After the dads had taken their food, they went outside to the backyard to eat and talk, while the moms stayed inside, asserting their dominance. Once most of the dads had finished eating their food, a couple of the more enterprising ones set up a net in the backyard and started up a game of badminton. Me, as well as my 2 brothers, were also in the backyard at the time. Gloriously, the weather only looked like it was getting better with time as the day progressed, and everyone was lazily enjoying themselves, whether on the court or roped into a conversation outside of it. As I watched the idyllic day unfold around me, 8-year-old me had one problem. I was bored. At that point, I noticed my older brother Ryaan over there, talking with a couple of his friends, all roughly 5 years older than me. From my eavesdropping, I gathered that they were planning on walking somewhere else in the neighborhood to hang out. As any 8-year-old would, I walked up and asked, "Can I go?" Did it matter where they were going? Apparently not to an 8-year-old me. Well, my older brother Ryaan had been at this older brother thing for a while, and so as soon as I asked a question, he knew what he had to do. "We'll ask our dad if I can go." So, I went over and walked to my dad, who was in the middle of a conversation. Not to be outdone by my brother, he thought of an even better plan. He told me to go ask my mother. So, I walked inside fearfully and asked her if I could go. Surprisingly, the answer was a yes, and I triumphantly returned outside with my mother's blessing. The reception from his group, I'm sure, was begrudging, but 8-year-olds are blind to that sort of thing. That was involved. The 5 of us started on our way, and on the way there, I was told that they were planning on heading to a forested area just on the edge of the neighborhood. And sure enough, within a couple of minutes, we came across an ill-defined dirt path branching right off of the neighborhood. It was surrounded by tall trees and overgrown bushes and plants. Great for branches hitting us on the way through. As we got onto the trail, we formed about a single file line as the trail was really narrow. As we got in deeper, the sunlight left us, replaced with shade cast by the tall trees overhead. So too, as we got further into the forest, the ground got muddier, and our walking slowed down until eventually we came across a chasm in the trail. I say chasm, I'm sure it was like 2 feet. But basically, there was this gap in the trail, and at the bottom lay what was a river of mud. And on the other side was a fairly thick stick plunged into the ground for those brave enough to make the jump across to stabilize themselves with. I watched, one by one, as my older brother's friends all took their jump, nailed it, and had their hands on the stick. For those of you familiar with The Matrix, I was reminded of a scene where they load up a training program, and there's this one main character, Morpheus, who basically flies from one building to another, while the protagonist just watches in awe.
I was the protagonist in that